Hi, welcome to Story Time with Dave Booker. Today we're going to continue on with Sheriff in a Small Town. We're doing the book three, and we're a few chapters into it already. Today's chapter we're going to be reading is Trouble in Our Midst. So I'll tell you what, let's just begin. I've had 6 cups of coffee, so it might be a good idea. The train slowly passed on the edge of Rocky's property, just past the deeply forested area that bordered it. Pole and bundle were thrown out, and the man leapt out quickly, following his staff. One of the hobos had arrived late and departed the train a good distance from the camp. He was tired and his body hurt from the constant shaking of the dilapidated boxcar. He seemed to have picked one of the oldest on the line and regretted it. Still, beggars can't be choosers. Not that he had ever begged, but otherwise the simile was apt. He wanted to sleep, but most importantly, he needed food. Found a raspberry bush and picked some of the ripe fruit. A little farther, he picked some wild carrots, pawpaws, and wild leeks. The spot he landed at was providing a veritable feast. He settled down to a raw but decent meal, found a comfortable spot to sleep in a deer nest, and curled up to exhausted sleep. He woke to the sound of laughter. Peering through the bushes, he saw at the far end a large farmhouse. Closer was the field broken into plots of an acre each, and towards the forested area were places reserved for members of the 4-H club. He ignored the children at the far side and focused on the teens who labored nearby. The mix of males and females were mostly of a type, farm stock, of a good sort. They had that open, fresh-faced look of a life lived on a farm. He focused on the young ladies presented for his inspection. One caught his eye immediately, but then she had dressed in such a manner as to accomplish that. She was wearing shorts and a shirt tied so that her slender waist was exposed. She smiled indulgently at the hungry stares of the males. She had learned early the benefits from being attractive, and she used her wiles to advantage. He passed over her quickly. Attractive, yes, but not his type. Another was more to his liking. Her skin was brown and showed golden in the sunlight, slender but firmly muscled. She'd probably be around 15 and developing into a woman. He rubbed the stubble on his cheeks as he looked at her with admiration. She was more type he liked. She had that wide-eyed innocence of a person who was unworldly and who had kept herself apart from others, probably homeschooled. She was unaware of the world's vices and would be easily swayed. She finished brushing her cow and went to the other side to brush her tail. He ducked into the forest and hid. He was pretty sure that he hadn't been seen. Looking around, he decided that where he dropped off was a good spot to stay at. He could rest and recover his strength and still keep an eye on his pretty little girl. In his mind, she was already his. That evening, he waited until the lights in the house went down. He waited a bit longer until he felt the time was right for him to emerge. Skirting the edges of the field, he kept in the shadows until he reached the farm buildings. He slid into the one the school was using. It was the largest and therefore was most probable to have the things he needed, pen and paper. Seated at the long table in the moonlight, he considered his next move. Thought about all the methods he had used in the past. Poetry, short notes that would pique their interest, straightforward notes extolling their virtues and beauty. Any of these had worked before. For this one, he considered that writing a note from a secret admirer would be his best ploy. Short and intriguing. If he did it right, they would be searching eagerly for the next message. After a few, they would be ripe for the picking. That's why he always went for the sheltered, innocent type. They were the most susceptible. They kept their notes secret. He changed his handwriting to imitate those of a young male. He wrote with the careful scrawl of a young man trying to make an impression on someone he desires. The note was short, but should do the job. He carefully checked the house for any lights. The occupants were still asleep. Time to make his escape. He stood carefully outside and followed the shadows of the building. keeping himself as flat as possible. He left through the smaller building and followed the shadows towards the forest. He made his way on the outskirts and paused. The sound of a screen door creaking open made him freeze. A dog came out, ran around, barked several times, and then ran inside. He saw a female in a flannel nightgown and an old robe in the brief moonlight before she disappeared into the house. Far too old for his liking. He couldn't really see how old she was, but she wasn't a young thing. He found the slight entrance where he had placed a small pile of rocks. This marked the entrance to his temporary home. Directly across was the cow that the young lady had been grooming. He quietly opened the gate, crept past the sleeping cow, and deposited his message in the box of brushes and ropes. His first foray since escaping prison was underway. All his deprivations would soon be sated. Waking once more to the sound of the students, he eased up to his vantage point. He had created a webbing network of vines and leaves before going to sleep so that he could sit out and remain hidden. The young lady was working again, milking the cow on a low stool. Done, she rushed the fresh milk into the sterilizer or whatever they used, and having rinsed the bucket under the outside tap, she came back and again began to groom the cow. Her hands were strong but gentle as she brushed the animal. The cow stood with eyes half closed, enjoying the sensation. Putting the brush away, she saw the folded paper. He had a momentary qualm that she might ignore it, but her curiosity was aroused. She opened the paper, read the short message, and immediately looked around to see who could have written and put it there. None of the males were making eye contact to see if she had found the note. She seemed to feel that a tall youth working on a corn patch might have written it. She walked hesitatingly towards him. He looked up, grinned, and waved. She waved back and went back to her work. He was pleased to see that she placed the page in her shirt pocket closest to her heart. She was intrigued. He wrote the next note carefully. He wanted to let her know that the youth she had thought wrote the note was not the one who did. Keep her guessing. That was the best option. He also kept her exclusively his. As long as she thought she had a secret admirer, she would stay away from the boys until she knew for sure who it was. This way she didn't offend them. Well, it was working. It always worked. As he sat eating his dug-up meal, he reminisced about the ones who had come before. They were all of the type, farm girls who had lived secluded. He made a mistake with the one he tried to get hold of the night he was sent to jail. He had been so frustrated, though. He had tried to be friendly, but he had competition. An army ranger back from the war had won her heart. I hadn't done anything. It wasn't even attracted to her. Just friendly, but it still rankled him. He had spent long nights in the loft of the barn watching over her as she slept, watching her protectively, so that in his mind he was her knight in shining armor. Problem was, he was older, almost 40 now, and his youth had been so easy. His strong physique and wavy hair had won many a young maiden's heart, and more. Too bad he had to eliminate them soon afterwards, but they might tell him then his freedom was gone. No more life on the rails, no more free meals from friendly farm folk. He had become very good at doing as little as possible, but making it look as if he was working hard. It all been so easy. Here one week, somewhere else the next, crisscrossing the country, leaving a trail of fallen beauties behind him. There were times when he almost felt sorry for them, a fleeting regret at what he had to do after he was done. But soon he'd get over it and look forward to his next conquest. Talbot was driving around, keeping an eye on things. He stopped off at the hobo camp and passed a pleasant morning before they were picked up and went their way to various farms. He'd asked around about any new hobos that might have been seen. Anyone new would have been instantly commented on, and word passed around through the grapevine. Hobos weren't as plentiful as they once were, and the breed was thought to be dying out. True, there were some youngsters who rode the rails, but they did it for thrills, not to earn a living. Talbot commiserated with them on the passing of an interesting way of life. They thanked him. They thanked the Lord that there were still a few areas around the rails where they were still welcome and appreciated. Talbot trusted them and knew that if Pat had tried to sneak in as one of their ilk, he'd been remembered. He reached over and patted Prince, he had brought along for company. "Well, boy, let's go to the lake and do some more practice runs." Prince wagged his tail enthusiastically. He enjoyed the training sessions and especially the rough and tumble wrestling after. He was developing into a strong dog ready to tackle anyone. Talbot directed him so that, okay, I screwed that one up. He enjoyed the training sessions, especially the rough and tumble afterwards. He was developing into a strong dog ready to tackle anyone Talbot directed him to. He was also a gentle dog who got along well with other dogs and especially children. Today, training was in search and rescue. Talbot dragged an old coat of his along the trail away from Prince's line of sight, got him out of the car and had him sniff around. Prince was up for most training, but scent training just wasn't working, and it seemed never would be able to be his specialty. Prince was good protection for the family, but he just wasn't cut out for police work. He was a little jealous that Rocky's dog Tucker was so good at it. He had to admit, though, Rocky had been training his dog since the day he got him. Prince was actually around 2.5 years old, so training was a little harder. At home, Rocky was pressing his uniform preparatory to going back on the job in a couple of days. Outside, he heard the chatter of the school children in the 4-H club. The 4-H club seemed to have begun to think of this home as their second one. They often came and went politely, but casually. Agnes had become a second mom, or some thought of her as a big sister. Agnes enjoyed having these young people around. It brought life and energy to the house, and she got to see Rocky as she had never imagined him. Kind of a father figure who showed real interest in what they had to say or show. He's going to be a good father to Mary, perhaps a bit overprotective, but from her experience, good fathers of daughters always were. It was one of their new friends who retained her hesitance when calling. Sheba still knocked and was careful to take her boots off and was continually seeking their advice. Sheba came in with a smile and then told that she had a secret. She was blushing and wanted to talk to Agnes alone. Rocky bowed and left with Tucker outside to check on the construction of the bathrooms. They were almost done, and then he could fill the pit where he had constructed an outhouse. Sitting at the picnic table, he looked over his property. The field was full of life. The plots had been planted, and the fruits of Mrs. Folletti's class were becoming evident. Several of the children saw him and ran up, taking his hand and leading him to show off their progress. His pride in their accomplishments was apparent, and he expressed amazement at the large fruit and vegetables around him. Mrs. Folletti was suddenly at his elbow, looking out over the field with him. She had tears of pride in what they had accomplished over the year. "We'll be ready for the final stage in a month or two." She looked up into Rocky's face, tears still streaming down her cheeks. "Can't thank you enough for doing this. It's made such a difference for the kids. Their grades have gone up by leaps and bounds, and they even are using their math lessons and figuring out how much they can do with their acre. I think we may eventually get our own agriculture center if this keeps up." She patted Rocky on the back and went off to check on some of the children. In the kitchen, over a cup of tea, Sheba was making her secret known to Agnes. "I've been getting these notes in my area. I don't know who it is put them there or when they could possibly have done it. I thought I knew who had written them. I thought it was Scott. He's shy and hardly says a word to me, but he smiles real nice and warm when I talk to him. I still think it's him, and I'd like that real fine. Got a letter a day ago that said it wasn't him, though. Then I should stop talking to the other boys. They say that I'll know who it is soon enough. Mrs. Stone, something about this last letter gave me the jitters. I don't know why, but it just seems so different. Agnes called Rocky inside. Rocky came in, sat down, was all attention. The letters were explained to him and shown. He read each one carefully, and when he had got the most recent, his face blanched. Sheba, I want to do a few things to this paper. Do you mind? Sheba shrugged. It gave her such bad thoughts that if Rocky destroyed it, that was just fine with her. He called Talbot and asked him to bring the evidence kit over to his house. Better bring Prince with you, since I'm sure you have him there. Talbot arrived quickly. Something in Rocky's voice put him on high alert. Rocky unpacked the kit on the table, looking for the powder and brush. Agnes had never seen the kit used, but understood Rocky was testing for fingerprints. Sheba sat with her elbows on the table and her chin resting in her fists. She hadn't expected Rocky to take things so seriously. Rocky dusted front and back, and a number of prints stood out. The thumb was of particular interest, as it was wide and flat, far too wide for a youth. Talbot's face grew taut at the sight. It was a print of an older person, probably male, and hidden somewhere close. He looked over at Sheba, who was staring with wide-eyed innocence. She didn't understand what those prints meant. She was just enjoying seeing things magically appearing on the paper. Talbot needed to corroborate that these were all written by the same person. Sheba, can I borrow the first one? Oh, I need to get your prints so that I can rule out any that you've made. Talbot brought out the ink pad and alcohol and a small card. He understood Rocky was distracting her. Rocky dusted the first note and found only two sets, hers, which were small and narrow, and the writer's, which were thick, wide, and flat. Rocky and Talbot could have been almost mirror images with angry looks on their faces. Rocky forced his voice to be soft and calm. Sheba, I need to keep these two. I hope you don't mind. Agnes, would you take her home? It's getting late, and, well, you have a big day tomorrow. Sheba thanked them for listening to her and slipped her bag over her shoulder. Talbot went outside with them and put Sheba's bike in the back of the truck. He dropped her radio in the glove box. Rocky brought out Mary in the car seat and belted her in, so next to Sheba. Agnes understood the implication. She was to stay away until she got a call to return from Rocky saying it was safe. Ordinarily, she would have worried about Rocky and Talbot, but from the looks on their faces, she was almost felt sorry for the person they were going after. Well, almost. They watched as Agnes left with Sheba singing lullabies to Mary, still asleep beside her. Once they were on the main road out, Rocky turned to Talbot. Well, you're acting sheriff, and I'm on leave, so what do we do? Talbot had expected Rocky to take over and was prepared to relinquish his authority. Rocky wasn't about to let him get out of things that easy. Talbot looked around, trying to work out his plan. Well, Rock, my dog isn't doing as good as yours, so let's bring Tucker with us. Prince can come if we need a few extra pounds of muscle. Let's walk up to the far side where the Forage Club plots are and see if anyone is hiding there. They've been putting notes in their box, and they have to be close. Clouds parted and a shaft of moonlight lit up Talbot and Rocky. Talbot brought out Prince, and Rocky got Tucker. Prince barked a welcome to Tucker, only to be barked at in his turn by Talbot. Quiet, you idiot! Prince tucked his tail under himself and looked up apologetically. In the bushes, the sound of a dog barking woke up the sleeping hobo. He peered out as the clouds cleared and the shaft of light shone on Talbot in his uniform. Cursing silently, he picked up whatever he could that had shown he had been there. Checked his watch and hoped that the train was still running on schedule. He went back to his vantage point and watched the sheriff and Rocky's progress. They walked the field and stopped at the girls' section. They examined the box area. Flashlight shone on the paths between plots. Rocky and Talbot kneeled over something in the dirt. The man saw them bring out a small folding ruler, and Talbot was calling off measurements while Rocky wrote notes in a small notebook. Satisfied with their findings, they climbed down over the back fences. The man backed up as quickly and quietly as possible and ran to the train tracks just as the train was slowing down for its ascent up the hill. From the security of the boxcar, he looked out at the area he had vacated. Cleaned up, he felt it would have been difficult to locate his presence. Difficult, but, well, not impossible, since as the train climbed slowly higher, he saw his bindle and staff leaning against a tree. Cursing fluently, he decided to go to his one place of security. He'd hide out at the hobo camp. He's counting on the fact that hobos protected their own, and he was sure to be secure from the law. They'd hide him and take care of him. In ordinary circumstances, he would have been right in his prediction. In this case, he was half right. They wouldn't hide him, but they certainly would take care of him. Emerging into the forested area, they waited for their eyes to adjust to the darkness. The moonlight filtered through the trees and illuminating the deer nest. Rocky poked around with a stick and drew out a handkerchief. "You got any gloves?" Talbot pulled out a couple of pairs and slipped one on himself. He pulled the evidence bags. Pulled the evidence bags. From his pants pocket and was about to bag the kerchief when he stopped. The small patch of light was a blue cloth near a tree. Approaching cautiously, he reached out and pulled in the bindle and staff. Talbot looked at Rocky. "Give Tucker a sniff at the handkerchief." Rocky did then, told Tucker to search. For a moment, Tucker circled the nest, then meandered around where it became evident that items had been dug up. Rocky got his dog's attention and told him wide search. The dog moved in a larger circle. He stopped when he smelt a recent new track. With sudden urgency, he tore off with Rocky barely able to hold on to the lead. The trail led to the train tracks. "Damn it! We should have thought of covering the tracks." Rocky shook his head. If he's a hobo, he's headed up to the camp. It's the only place he'll feel so protected. Talbot wasn't convinced. "Yeah, but if it's Pat, he wouldn't even know where it is." "Say, well, let's check the bindle." Talbot brought out a flashlight and shined it downwards as Rocky untied the bundle. Inside were a few personal items, a few handkerchiefs, a shirt, notebook, and under the notebook was a collection of hair. There were small units tied with string and all gathered together, tied into a larger bundle. Rocky and Talbot both were growing cold as an idea slowly formed into their minds. Talbot opened the notebook. "Hey, Rock, it's a diary." He read a few pages and tears began to fall. His body began to rock and Rocky forced him to sit down. Rocky picked up the diary and read himself. He felt sick to his stomach as the horror of Darren's crimes were laid out in detail. Talbot leapt to his feet and ran to the squad car. Rocky was fit, but Talbot had at least a foot of height on him and was fast. Rocky caught up, thrust the dogs into the back seat, and got in himself as the wheels of the squad car spun into and the car leapt forward. Rocky put his belt and held onto the dashboard and armrest. "Hey, Talbot! Talbot! Deputy Talbot!" Talbot immediately took his foot off the accelerator. "Sorry, Rock, reading that shit just got me so worked up. You sure we'll find him in the camp?" Rocky was stern. "We'll find him there. He's gone where he thinks they'll protect him. I don't think he knows that they know exactly what he tried to do to Tom's daughter. And hell, not one of them would lift a finger to protect him. My only concern is that they don't try and kill him before we get there." Talbot muttered, "Hell, it wouldn't break my heart if they did." Approaching the camp, Darren leapt out of the boxcar and did a rolling landing. Raising up, he saw the camp 50 yards away. He reached into his back pocket for his handkerchief to wipe the sweat from his brow. The handkerchief had fallen out somewhere. Checked his other pockets. He didn't have another on him. He stopped and rechecked his pockets. His diary couldn't have fallen out without him noticing. It was thick enough he'd have felt it or seen it. He mentally cast his mind on his temporary campsite. It wasn't in the deer's nest or anywhere he had been when cleaning up. Then he remembered the staff and bindle leaning against a tree. Felt a cold chill run up his spine. All he possessed was in that bundle. His diary, his clothes, his souvenirs were all left behind. Now it was even more urgent that he reach the camp. His very life and freedom depended on it. He hit the road running as fast as he could. He burst into the camp yelling, hide me, they're coming to get me. The hobos, hearing the cries of distress and that someone was in danger, prepared to make the man disappear. One grabbed him as he arrived and led him to a corner of the camp. Another moved a wall that was covered in web of vines. Someone brought the newcomer something to eat and drink. Another brought a fire to ensure the man didn't need medical attention. Everything happened so fast and no one saw the man's face until the light was brought in and one of the hobos who had some medical training was doing a cursory examination. Found nothing wrong except for a high heart rate and fast breathing brought on by overexertion and extreme fright. As the light filled the area, Lou, who was holding the torch, suddenly had a recognition. He'd worked on the farm last time that Darren had been with them. Hey, it's Darren! Darren's name echoed around the camp as people came back to see him. Suddenly, the tone of cries of Darren changed from recognition to anger. They had all heard what Darren had tried to do to Tom's children, primarily to Millie. Strong hands grasped Darren. His hands were tied to posts and his legs were tied together. Darren tried to cry out, but a handkerchief was swiftly stuffed in his mouth and held in place with another wrapped around his lower face. The sound of sirens was heard in the distance. The sheriff was coming from the steady rise in volume, was coming fast. One by one, the hobos lashed out at Darren, striking him from head to waist. Talbot skidded to a halt on the edge of the camp. Getting out, he was met with a contingent of hobos. He's here. We're just giving him a welcome home party. Come on and have some coffee. Talbot and Rocky were torn. As lawmen of high ideals, their duty was clear. Take Darren in immediately. As men and fathers, they were tempted to let the hobos have their say first. They sat down and had a quick coffee. Talbot turned to Rocky. Rocky, I'm the one on duty. I'll take the blame if anything comes down. Rocky shook his hand while shaking his head no. Well, if anything comes down because of this, we'll both take equal blame. I don't give a damn what happens. Finishing their cuffs, they asked to be taken to their prisoner. A sharp whistle echoed into the law, and the law was taken on a surreptitious route that made 10 yards into over 150. When they arrived, Darren was lying on a bed of leaves. His hands and legs were still bound. Rocky looked slightly concerned. He's not dead, is he? Lou smiled. Nah. When he leapt out of the boxcar, he hit a stony patch and rolled down the hill. Lots of rocks and branches in that area. Poor guy got banged up pretty bad. All the other hobos nodded in agreement, their faces a mask of commiseration for Darren's plight. Pulling hands helped carry Darren into the back of the squad car. Ted and Rocky shook hands all around with thanks for looking after Darren for them. With a dog on either side, he was under constant observation and secure. About halfway back to town, he woke up and immediately started yelling. The dogs, sensing his hostility, bristled and growled, their lips drawn back onto a formidable teeth. Darren quickly realized his precarious position and sat back quietly. For the rest of the trip, there was a low, rumbling growl from the rear seat and the sound of pathetic whimpering. Rocky undid the rope around Darren's leg and led him into the courthouse. Talbot was at the desk, phoning for a pickup and getting the evidence in order and packed. Well, bleh, getting the evidence in order and packed. In the cell, Darren was asking for an ice pack and a couple of aspirin. It was completely ignored. Rocky put in the call over the radio so Agnes could go home. She had been having an ice cream sundae with Sheba and her father. She brought him into the courthouse, all smiles. Rocky, Talbot, this is John, Sheba's father. Rocky's first impression of Sheba's father was that he was the spitting image of every picture he'd ever seen of John Henry. Tall, broad-shouldered, and muscular, he had a burn scar that went down his neck that made him look even more imposing. When Talbot saw them, he looked at Rocky in alarm, which matched Rocky's own concern. Agnes, I think you might want to take Sheba and her father home. The tone told Agnes that this was not a safe place for them, and looking into the cell, she could see why. Something in the way Darren was looking at Sheba made her realize where the letters had come from and from whom. She paled and insisted that they leave. From the cell, Darren was muttering almost in delirium. You're mine. No one else will have you, and when I've had you, you'll end up like all the rest. But you're mine now and forever. It wasn't said loudly, but loud enough in the silence of the courthouse. Sheba turned around slowly, and her brow puckered in confusion. Agnes led her outside quickly. Come on, John, I'll take you home. John was frozen as he put two and two together. Over lunch, he'd heard about his daughter's secret admirer. Realization that the writer was a 40-year-old man who was close to making him lose his mind. He lunged at the cell, his arms reaching forward through to throttle Darren. Darren recoiled to the farthest corner, yelling for the sheriff to protect him. The door of the courthouse opened to the sight of Talbot and Rocky struggling to bring this behemoth of a man clear of the cell. Seeing more sheriffs, John stood seething and glaring as the paperwork of transfer was filled out, the evidence collected, and the prisoner transferred back to the state's care. Agnes waited for Rocky to call her on the radio. She was playing songs and singing with the radio in a comic way to distract Sheba. In the courthouse, Talbot was as the acting sheriff, explained the situation and probable outcome. John expressed his appreciation of Talbot and Rocky protecting his daughter. Thanks for protecting me too. If I could have reached him, I'd have choked the ever-living life out of him. Talbot nodded. I know. We were tempted to let you, but if you ever say I said that, I'll deny it to my dying day. Rocky called Agnes and said it was safe to return. Sheba wanted to be shown around and have the office explained to her. John sat with a cup of coffee and waited for the tour to end. Talbot eventually led her to the other cell that had been unoccupied. Sheba, this is a very special cell. Can you guess why? She looked at the cell and compared it with the other. Both seemed the same. Well, was it for really bad people? Talbot grinned. Nope. It's the only cell in the county that once had a horse as its occupant. Pulled the picture of a horse asleep on the cell floor under a blanket with a pillow under his head. Sheba almost wet herself laughing. Tore over, John and Sheba decided to walk home. John shook hands with Talbot and Rocky once more and thanked them. Looking at his daughter, he began to tear up at the terrible thought of what might have been. The next chapter is Murphy's Law. So if you know Murphy's Law, it means whatever bad can happen is going to. So it kind of gives you an idea of what's going to be about. So that is it for today. Today is Tuesday, and the next one will be done on Friday. So Friday at 10 o'clock, I hope you're here. I hope you're enjoying this book, and I look forward to seeing you again on our next reading. So in the meantime, be good and be good to yourself. Bye.